Hey everyone, well, I am Mr. Cleveland Warren, having less fun than any human being can ever have. And guess what? This is our third episode. We made it 3 episodes now, but we're still in January, so there's going to be a few more. And don't mind my phone. And today's episode is my 16 favorite musicians of all time, or as favorite musical
maybe
acts.
your top 16 musical acts?
Yeah, musical acts, yes. And starting up with the list on number 16 is Nilsson. Also talking about him, even to today, 25 or now 26 years after he passed on. But his genres ranged from folk, rock, even classical. He did a good rendition of As Time Goes By from Casablanca. And when the Beatles said something about Nilsson, they said that was his favorite. Both Lennon and McCartney agreed that was their favorite musician at the time. I kind of wonder, the whole Paul is Dead thing. I wonder if Harry Nilsson actually called himself Billy Shears or William Campbell as a double identity for Nilsson because of how much his music was influenced. So maybe Nilsson was McCartney.
Yeah, maybe he replaced Paul McCartney when everybody said Paul McCartney died.
Yes.
That's what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Number 15, Simon and Garfunkel. Actually, they were originally known as Tom and Jerry, but they weren't named after a cat and mouse duo. It would have been interesting, but still, Simon and Garfunkel were around during the folk revival, which was in the 60s. You had Bob Dylan with them as Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Pete Seeger, and Woody Guthrie, just to name a few. But Simon and Garfunkel had 5 albums in the 60s. They started with Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m., and ended with Bridge Over Troubled Water in 1970, the year when music actually collapsed that year, basically. When one part fell, the other went up, but I'll explain that a little bit later. But Simon & Garfunkel is my 15th favorite musical act and still is the duo that everyone looks up towards when having a 2-piece band. Simon & Garfunkel. My 14th favorite musical act is Chicago. As a Clevelander, I like Chicago. But hear me out. During the 70s, they had a string of #1 albums as well as songs, and they were real hot that decade. Well, they were not in the late 70s. You saw my first video why Chicago 16 was a very big deal, because it was their comeback album, and that came from the 80s, and they had more string of hits, like Hard to Say I'm Sorry, even one from Diane Warren, Look Away, and they're still played on radio today. Both eras. 13th favorite musical act, Genesis. A trick of the tale of 2 Genesises. Is that how you say it? I don't know.
I don't know. It's your list. You're the one
Okay.
who comes up with the stuff.
Well, Genesis from 1969 through 1974 was basically Peter Gabriel's band. And, well, maybe around by late 1970, it was both Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins, because they acquired him around Genesis acquired Phil Collins in 1970. Peter Gabriel formed the band alongside with Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford. But in 1974, Peter Gabriel left, and that was a time of transition when Phil Collins would hold the reins of Genesis. That was a different time around then. For a while, you had like 10 to 20-minute songs from them, and now you're having, excuse me, that's what people think about Phil Collins' Genesis during the 80s, like, when you sold out, Bill Collins so good. He made the band too poppy. Well, during that era, it was a different brain. If Genesis wanted to survive in the rock world, they had to cut down a lot of their songs. But Bill Collins still put in a couple 11-minute songs on some of their albums. I don't think that there was any in We Can't Dance the last time Bill Collins was in Genesis, and he left for his solo career. Bill Collins, I have a Grammy or an Oscar or something.
All right, go on. Yeah.
Okay, so that was from South Park.
I know what it was.
Number 12, my 12th favorite musical act, Todd Rundgren. He's one of the many musicians out there that actually could play all the instruments. The album Something Anything, he mostly played all the instruments on there, except for side 4, but anyhow, on record, but anyhow, he had a good range of music as well. Even though I consider him the secondary king of pop because, he had a lot of great pop songs and his genres were all over the place. He even did some prog stuff, as well as some psychedelic. Now, my 11th favorite musical act, Frank Sinatra. Yes, the chairman of the board, Francis Albert Sinatra. Now, he has to be on this list. Now, he may not been a fan of rock and roll, but his footprint was everywhere in the rock genre. Even though the only time was when he rammed his shoe on his own radio when he heard Light My Fire twice.
He left his literal footprint in his own car radio because he smashed it to pieces with his foot after hearing the Doors' Light My Fire twice on the radio on the same car trip, right?
Yes, I'm surprised he didn't say, okay, I'll light you on fire. I'll light you on fire.
It's Jim Morrison, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, just light him on fire altogether. That sounds a little more violent.
Well, he was part of the mafia as well.
Allegedly.
Yeah, and but he was the leader of the Rat Pack, hence chairman of the board.
Mm-hmm.
And he deserves to be in the Rock Hall because of early influences. He coined he didn't coin it, but at the time, teenagers of the 40s, the Bobby Soxers and what have you. He was an early influence towards many of the rock
and roll that came after him.
Mm-hmm.
All
yes.
right, yeah, that's
and so Rock Hall people, if you're watching, I doubt it. Put Sinatra in early influence, or at least let's make him an early influence. He also formed Reprise Records, or Reprise, or however you say it, which actually had a lot of musicians. One of them was the Kinks, and the other was Fleetwood Mac. My 10th favorite musical act, The Who.
Who?
The Who.
Who?
Yeah, The Who.
The Who.
Yes, The Who.
Okay.
Yeah. In the 70s, there was a thing I watched once that you're either on Team Led Zeppelin or Team The Who. And our parents really loved The Who. And I love them too. Love them more than Led Zeppelin. They had so many great albums, especially Tommy, Who's Next, Quadrophenia. Those are great albums. Who's Next was going to be a rock opera, even though Tommy and Quadrophenia are. So there's many reasons why I like The Who, because they made the rock opera even more popular. My 9th favorite musical act, Billy Joel. Yes, the Piano Man. He was that or Elton John, but I'm sorry, Sir Elton John. I like the Piano Man more. And he had so many great albums. There's Piano Man itself. There's An Innocent Man, Stormfront, The River of Dreams. And from what I heard, if he ever has a concert again, I am going to tweet or email Billy Joel or something like that, telling him how much I love his albums. Maybe he can give me front row seats at his next concert if he does have one, because he's done that before.
Yeah, it's people who buy the cheap seats, and he moves them to the front row because he wants to see people who are actually fans of his.
And I have a Billy Joel shirt. I'll wear that.
Yeah, if you get spotted in the nosebleeds,
Yeah,
maybe you'll find your way up there.
Yeah, okay. Oh, but this show is actually part of the Warren Brothers Broadcasting Network, which is home of the Warren Brothers Sports Show and few future shows. One of them coming soon, the Craptastic Movie Show. So subscribe and ring that bell to get notified. More cowbell. Okay, my 8th favorite musical artist is the Divine Comedy. No, it's not a book. It's actually a band from the United Kingdom, which not many Americans heard except for me and a few handful of people, which was founded in 1990 by a guy, a Northern Irish guy named Neil Hannon, who would use instruments that aren't really in rock music, the harpsichord, the accordion, the banjo. He has some Baroque pop music. It's like if Brian Wilson and Elvis Costello did something together, because many of his songs are really cynical, just like Elvis Costello's, and he uses different instruments, just like Brian Wilson. And I listen to some of the Divine Comedy stuff, as well as my guy who's helping me out. The 7th musical act I enjoy, Stevie Wonder. This is another musician who's a multi-instrumentalist. His first time he did that was Music of My Mind. The only instrument he had that was from somebody else was a trombonist, for his first album that he did in the 70s. Well, there was another one, but this was when he just did everything basically by himself. During the 60s, he was a prodigal musician around the Motown time. Then came the 70s, where he did that near minimalist music. He had 3 albums that won Album of the Year: Inner Visions, Fulfilling This First Finale, Songs in the Key of Life. Even Paul Simon, in between, said, "Thank God Stevie Wonder didn't make an album that year, because Still Crazy After All These Years became the album of the year that year." And Stevie Wonder was just busy with Songs in the Key of Life. And even during the 80s, he was still out there making music. Even that song from that Lady in Red, it was on the Cosby Show. And he's one of the best harmonica players out there, or for all you blues people, harp players.
Do they call it the mouth harp, or is it
Yeah, mouth harp.
Right? Because the harp's what harpo from the Marx Brothers.
Yes.
Yeah, Stevie Wonder, to my knowledge, didn't play the actual
No,
harp.
but he did have a song that had, you could say, 2 harps. If It's Magic, because he had a harp player, and then he was
playing the mouth.
Yeah. Okay. Number 6, Jimi Hendrix. His name, he called himself James Marshall Hendrix.
Well, I mean, he didn't call himself that. That's the name his parents gave him.
I think there was another name they gave him, but I don't know.
Okay.
But he's the ultimate guitarist of all time. No comparisons. Jimmy Page is not number 1. Jimi Hendrix is number 1. Case closed. And around the 60s, up until 1967, nobody knew who Jimi Hendrix was. But then he went to England. He formed the Jimi Hendrix Experience. It's like, whoa, I'm experienced. And even Paul McCartney told the Monterey Pop Fest, you got to put Hendrix in the lineup. I've heard that Jimi Hendrix and Paul McCartney were good friends because, a lot of pictures that his future wife, Linda Eastman, would take of Hendrix.
Yeah, that's a part of their friendship. There was Linda Eastman, who later became Linda McCartney. has set where she was a burgeoning photographer.
Yep.
As her family is famous for the Eastman. It later became the Eastman Kodak Company, right? As it got bought out by Kodak.
It is debatable. There is some question about that.
But so that's why she got into photography, and she would take pictures of Jimi Hendrix. Is Hendrix and McCartney either were friends or became friends after she took photographs.
But unfortunately, 1970, he died, leaving a somewhat of a gap in music. But now, if you ever want to play the guitar, you should always look to Jimi Hendrix. I know you won't start like Jimi Hendrix, but it's either you'll be like somebody playing Guitar Hero rather than Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, if you want to work on intriguing guitar playing and solos and things like that, a person that you would want to emulate is Jimi Hendrix.
That or Eric Clapton.
Clapton's up there too.
Yeah, but
no, he's not on your list, right?
No, but number 5, my favorite is Procol Harum. This is a band that if you had Johann Sebastian Bach, Ray Charles, Bob Dylan, and Jimi Hendrix all in the same room, which is very impossible because they all were never around the same time, except for maybe Bob Dylan and Hendrix. But you had the soulful Ray Charles-like singing by Gary Brooker. You had the lyrics that are off the wall by Keith Reed, who was always in the background. Then you had the organ solos, just like Matthew Fisher, and the wild guitar solos like Robin Trower. So that's how I compared them all. And that's why their name is somewhat from Latin, from Beyond These Things, because if you heard anything besides A Wider Shade of Pale, it is Beyond These Things. I recommend this band as well. And number 4, my favorite artist, musician, the Moody Blues. Going from one prog rock band to another, still in the 60s, Moody Blues started out as a blues band. And they had Denny Laine, who would leave after Go Now and failed attempts, but then Justin Hayward would replace Denny Laine, and John Lodge would return to his friends, because John Lodge was in one of the pre-Moody Blues bands, and the album that would launch that whole new thing would be Days of Future Past, featuring Tuesday Afternoon and Nights in White Satin, and they had 7 great albums during the 70s, and actually the Great Lakes region really likes the Moody Blues, and we're one of the few fans. And the first time we heard them was the mid '80s with "In Your Wildest Dreams," but they still had that retro thing going on, and the '60s retro thing was a kind of a big deal in the '80s. Not as big as the '50s thing in the '70s, or the '70s feel in the '90s, or the '90s feel right now. But speaking of '90s, number 3 favorite artist, Barenaked Ladies. Who says humor does not belong in music? Well, one of them that's what Weird Al would probably say, but another group of people would say that is the Barenaked Ladies, who started in 1989, but got their first album in 1992 with Gordon, and my favorite, Maybe You Should Drive, which came in 94, and like every other year, they had an album. But by 2009, one of the founders and lead singers, Stephen Page, left for a solo career. And I think, in my opinion, Steve Page was like the genius of Barenaked Ladies, because he had the witty humor, but he also was cynical at the same time. It's almost like he was Canada's answer to Neil Hannon. And he also did a song called Brian Wilson.
Who's Neil Hannon?
He's the lead singer of Divine Comedy.
Oh, okay. You said that before. All right.
Yes. And but speaking of Brian Wilson, number 2 best, my favorite band of all time, musician, The Beach Boys. This is America's rock and roll band. They actually gave the Beatles a run for their money in the mid-'60s because the Beatles would have Rubber Soul, Brian Wilson would bring in Pet Sounds, and the Beatles brought in Revolver, and Brian Wilson almost... he didn't give us that. Mike Love gave us that. Or was it Mike Hull?
You gave us Gas?
No, it was Smile.
Oh, okay.
And this album Smile would have came in the 1967. It was the right in its own taking. But unfortunately, Brian Wilson had a nervous breakdown. It's like, well, he was always assaulted by his own father as well as his cousin Mike, because like, no, you don't mess with the formula, man. I'm sorry, there's no cursing on here.
It's fine.
But yeah, and then the Beach Boys became a parody of itself now, but Brian Wilson and his brothers tried to keep the band together, and he still tours with his best friend Al Jardine, who is from Ohio, Lima, Ohio. That is, so I think that's southwest of Cleveland. But I really think that when Brian Wilson does covers of the Beach Boys songs, it's like you're there.
I thought it was pronounced Lima, Ohio. Like you don't eat Lima beans, right? You eat Lima beans.
I'll have to get back to you on this one, but yeah. But Mike Love's Beach Boys is basically a Beach Boy cover band as we speak. That's what happens when you don't mess with the formula and you have a basketball player called Kevin Hull.
Well, his nephew is Kevin Love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, for honorable mentions, there's too many for me to mention. Sure, I can say Steely Dan, No Doubt, Hootie and the Blowfish, The Left Bank, Michael Jackson, Queen, ELO, ELP, EMF, EWF.
Wait, you would put EMF on there, or are you just starting to say bands with letters? Because Eat More Fruit, they only had that one song. They're unbelievable, right?
No, that was You're Ugly and Bald.
Regardless, you're going on too long.
Okay, yeah, but yeah, I could have the Carpenters. I know I left out a lot of ladies out there, but don't worry, ladies. I'll have a list for you because I know there's Sheryl Crow, Diana Ross, Linda Ronstadt, Mariah Carey, even Whitney Houston, Tina Turner.
There are so many women that they are deserving of their own top 16 list, is what you're saying.
Yes, they
Not
should.
that they're lesser and separate.
Right.
Right.
But yeah, there'll be more lists to come. But my favorite musical artist of all time is the Beatles. No surprise. It's the Beatles. They were the reason why music today is the way it is. If we didn't have the Beatles, music would be like music around the 60s would be like music of today. All productive and back manufactured.
Overproduced.
Yes. Yeah. And not like the late, not so great Phil Spector kind of thing. But they came to America at the right place at the right time. It was just America was still mourning the death of JFK, and then a lot of teenagers had somebody to look up to. Elvis wasn't doing much. The Beach Boys, they were okay, and Bob Dylan, he was only there for a while, but the Beatles really did help out anyone and everyone who wanted to be a rock and roll musician.
Yeah, they're probably the biggest influence of all time.
Mm-hmm. And they were only around for 8 years, but their music can last for 800 years. And of all people who wanted to keep the band together was Paul McCartney. And the Beatles had so many genres. They can go world one time, they can go psychedelic, they can go classical, they can go jazz, they could even a little bit of heavy metal and blues. Helter Skelter. And I don't mean what Charlie Manson would approach, or was that Marilyn Manson?
No, it was Charlie.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm surprised Charlie and Phil Spector didn't do something together.
Oh, that would have been quite the tandem.
Yep, but...
Hey, sit up kind of straight there.
Fine.
So, I want to point something out. You wore a Johnny Cash T-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't mention him at all. He's not in the top 16. He goes in an honorable mention. Are you doing that ironically? I mean, one of the greatest
Yes,
artists
pure
of all time.
irony. Mhm.
You did that on purpose?
Yes,
Or are you just realizing that now?
I meant to do that.
So you purposely wore a Johnny Cash T-shirt
Yes.
and then didn't mention him at all.
Well, I could wear Jurassic Park next Thursday because next week I'm going to mention about one thing called my next list would be 16 films, my 16 favorite films of all time. There's a group of 4, a group of 3. Something about a controversial film. Well, controversial now. Someone telling its life story. And some people have stories at a hotel, on a boat, on a train, on a plane, or.
Is that kind of giving it away a little bit? At least one of them?
Okay.
Are there automobiles involved in that one as well?
Well,
maybe. You'll have to find out next week, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I'll be wearing a Jurassic Park if I can find it.
I don't think anyone gives a crap what you wear. I just pointed it out because, you literally went through the whole list, didn't mention Johnny Cash once, and you're wearing a Johnny Cash T-shirt.
Okay, well.
I just find that funny.
Yeah, well, okay, well, I'm Paul, Mr. Cleve Warren, having less fun than any human being can possibly ever have. So, good luck.
That's your sign off? Just good luck?
Okay.
All right, I'm ending it now.
Okay.
All right.